योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्.
Greetings and namaste to one and all. It is a great honor for me to give this webinar for the UGC sponsored online refresher course in law, UGC HRDC Gujarat University, Ahmedabad. Honorable Vice Chancellor of Gujarat University, respected Head of the Department of the Gujarat University School of Law, esteemed professors of this department, coordinator of this UGC sponsored online refresher course in law, HRDC Gujarat University, Professor Dr. Bhavish Bharat, dear participants, and to all those who are present for today's webinar, I thank each and every one of you for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Today's theme is the importance of international law policies, new dimensions for India. When we say the importance of international law policies, new dimensions for India, it implies many things. However, we will take only three things which are of utmost significance for today's webinar. One, what do we mean by international law? Two, what do we mean by international law policies? And three, what are the new dimensions that are required for India, Indian Constitution, and so on? We all know what is meant by international law and what is referred as international law policies. International law, simply put, is a body of rules, a kind of law based on customs or derived from customs, international treaties, and various other sources that are there enlisted in Article 38 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice appended to the United Nations Charter, sourced from the practices of the states, the nations, or from international organizations as well, and other important bodies. International law as such is a very interesting phenomenon in the language of law. International law is one of the highest ideals. It's a great aspiration. Each and every country that are positioned in this planet, they all have to come together with a particular aspiration as a collective humanity to live for a particular cause. This is, as such, is not yet achieved, and it has not been there. Before the idea of the advent of international law, each and every country lived in different spaces, different geographical locations. With the advent of the sea routes and the gradual growth of migration and the development of the march of human civilization across various geographical spaces, each and every country and their citizens and their nationals, they observe the patterns of behavior regulated by law of other jurisdictions which they encountered. Obviously, there will be a difference because each and every country in their geographical space, they have their own set of codes or behaviors that are influenced by climate, that are influenced by culture, that are influenced by history, and many factors and so on. So the advent of international law itself is a great aspiration for the humanity as a whole. To bring laws between nations, international laws, to form a body of rules, to form a body of laws based on customs from various sources or based on positive enactments, agreements, treaties, and various other sources developed by the nation states, the sovereign, and also the international organizations that are working over and above or in addition to the state sovereign governments of different countries. This is what international law is all about. It's just a body of rules. We are not getting into the discussion whether this bodies of rules or the body of rules, how efficient it should be, whether it is to be considered as a law in the strict sense of the meaning given to the municipal law, but we just take international law as a body of rules derived out of customs and treaties sourced from states and international organizations and other various other factors. They all come together to form something, to create something. It is in this context we have this idea, if the international community is going to come together, what is the plan that they have? Why they want to come together? We all know that before the advent of international law, each and every country existed in their own geographical spaces. But the movement of civilization took place, the social, cultural, political migrations, and so on. And with the development of trade and technology, communication and aerial navigation, and so on, the meeting point became very complex. It is at this juncture, international law became very seriously debated whether it is a law, whether it can work as a law or not. Because if it is a law, there has to be a purpose. If it is a purpose, there has to be an outcome. Whether we have achieved that intended outcome or not, that is subject to interpretation from each and every country. Because each and every country, which is from different geographical spaces, and they are coming together for a particular socio-economic political causes, each and everyone wants to assert and retain their sovereignty, their culture, and so on. But in a common gathering like this, it is slightly difficult to push and pull and get what one wants. This is where some kind of a planning is required. And this planning of what international law should be is what is called international law policies or policies of international law. So international law policies means there is a plan which has a purpose and there are certain principles or processes which will be put into practice in order to execute that purpose. A plan is a direction. It gives a focus. And that focus has some kind of a purpose. And that purpose is to be achieved by a certain processes, certain principles. It is called a blueprint. So international law on one side and international policies on the other side, they are two different sides of the same coin, and they both have to operate together. How do we know or how do we understand what do we call an international law policy, or what are international policies? Who will decide when each and every country has come from a different geographical space and they are pushing and pulling, asserting what they want and what others should get, what they should get, and so on. So the plan becomes difficult, the purpose becomes frustrated, and the principles and the process gets defeated. In order to understand what can be an international law policy or what are international law policies, we can take two sources from United Nations Charters, which means Article 1 and 2 of the United Nations Charter. As I have said, international law policy or international law policies mean there has to be a purpose and there has to be a process. That is a policy. Policy means purpose plus principle or process is called a policy. What are the purposes that international law can have? What are the principles that we can have by which we can achieve the purposes? This is the most significant question. If we understand this, then we understand what a country, especially a country like India, should have in their legal system in order to incorporate what is international law coming from outside, and in order to give as a country towards the international community their international law policies towards the international relations and community and so on. If you understand what are the purposes of international law, and if we understand what are the principles by which we are going to achieve these purposes, we get a clarity of what is an international law policy. We will go step by step. Article 1 says, which is designed as a purposes for the United Nations, for the members who are joining that organization. It says to maintain international peace and security. This is the first purpose. Currently, United Nations as an international organization has taken the role of international law. Whether they are achieving it or not, whether they can achieve it or not is a different question, because each and every country has to participate and give their best in order to make international community achieve what international law wants each and every country to achieve. Currently, United Nations serves as a platform. It facilitates all member countries to come together and discuss these purposes and discuss the processes by which they will attain. The first purpose, they say, is to maintain international peace and security. In political science, it is called the state of nature. As such, we all need to live with peace and security because that is the state of nature. That is how it is. So we need to maintain the state of nature, which is international peace and security. So each and every country, wherever they are going and for whatever purpose they are interacting, they have to constantly keep in mind that we need to maintain international peace and security in our relation with others. And how do we do that? And to that end, to take collective measures, effective collective measures for prevention and removal of the threats to peace. It's just not that maintenance of international peace and security automatically happens. It happens by taking a collective measure in order to prevent anything which is going to disturb that international peace and security. In order to suppress the acts of aggression, the other breaches against peace, against security, and so on. One is to maintain international peace and security, and consequence of it, it is to take an effective measure, a collective measure, to prevent threats to the peace, to remove the threats to the peace, and to suppress the activities which might endanger the peace and security or the maintenance of international peace and security. When we say when we have to take collective measure, when we need to prevent, when we need to remove threats, or when we need to suppress the acts of aggression, we need to do it peacefully, not by creating yet another aggression. It says that to bring about by peaceful means and in conformity with the principles of justice and international law, adjustment and settlement of international disputes or situations which might lead to the breach of the peace. Which means the first purpose is very clear because this forms the core policy. This is the foundation of international law policy. First core foundation. Maintain international peace and security and to prevent actions, to suppress actions through peaceful means and in conformity with whatever that we all have arrived as international law, with a sense of justice, and then dispute settlement mechanism with that sense of justice, so on. The second purpose, which contributes to the international law policy, is to develop friendly nations based on the respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. It is in consequence to the first purpose, we must develop friendly nations. Development of friendly nations avoids doing a course corrective action, avoids doing a preventive action or removal of the threats because we become friends. So we need to develop friendly relations among the nations. And how do we develop the friendly relations? By respecting that both the parties have equal rights. Both the parties have their own sense of self-determination to decide what they want. And then take measures, not just only think, not only just put the imagination, not only just aspire and desire, but to put things in place, to take appropriate measures to strengthen the universal peace, which is in connection with peace and security. This is the second purpose. The third purpose being to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of economic, social, cultural, humanitarian character, promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, religion. And how do we achieve all these things? By developing an international cooperation. Why do we need to cooperate? We need to cooperate because the human life in this world, the human societies in this world is in a constant state of flux, is in a constant state of growth and development. As a result of which, what was at one point of time a state of harmony and order, when they grow, either this side grows or this side grows, and this seesaw conflicts going up and down or pushing and pulling from either sides, it creates the conflict which should not lead to the disturbance of the peace and security. As a result of which, the whole purpose will be lost. The whole international law policy might get distracted. So we need to develop international cooperations in solving problems. What are the problems? Social, economic, cultural, humanitarian, human rights, fundamental freedoms. And when we want to solve problems or when we want to understand where the problems come from, we need to be very clear that there should not be any kind of a discrimination as to race, sex, language, religion, and so on. And finally, to become a center for harmonizing all these actions in order to attain these common ends. So, to put it in simple understanding, the purposes of international law form part of the core foundation of the international law policy or international law policies. Maintenance of international peace and security, take collective measures for it, prevent any kind of aggression, remove any kind of a threat that is taking place, or follow all kinds of the sense of justice and adopt peaceful methods to settle the disputes and so on, and develop friendly relations by respecting equal rights for everyone, by promoting self-determination for each and everyone, and then to take appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace, and then create a cooperation platform to solve the disputes or the conflicts that come from social, economic, cultural, political, religious, and so on, and then without any discrimination to race, culture, sex, language, and so on. And this creates the center, and it becomes a place where harmonization of all activities of the human nature come into picture, which is represented through a country, which is represented through a constitution, which is represented inside out from a nation towards the international community. And similarly, the international community is nothing but a combination or a composition of various countries who, in turn, when they want to interact with any other country outside in, they should also keep in mind that these are the founding purposes of international law, which we all must respect and apply and adopt and accomplish. If each and every country thinks like this and acts like this, then that becomes the international law policy of each and every country. Now, these purposes are no doubt great, but how do we achieve this? There has to be a certain process in place. There has to be certain way of doing things. There are certain principles which needed to be followed in order to fulfill this. And that is stated in Article 2 of the United Nations Charter. It says, the principle of the sovereign equality of all states, all the members of the United Nations organization. Each and everyone is sovereignly equal. There is no discrimination on that. Each and every country, whatever be the nature of their strength, social, economic, political, cultural, religious, whatever be the nature of it, they have that sovereign equality that they can decide what they want. That is the principle of self-determination. That is the principle of equal rights, which we saw in the purposes of international law. So when we say sovereign equality of all members, it is nothing but giving the right to self-determination and understanding that each and every country has an equal status. And two, when we recognize each and every country, they have the sovereign equality, and their interactions, they should have good faith in fulfilling the respective obligations which each and everyone give to themselves. The principle of good faith, what is called the Pacta Sunt Servanda, under the law of treaties. And they have to settle their disputes in a peaceful way, not in an aggressive way. And then they have to refrain from the use of force or threat to use force. One country cannot use force on others or threat to use force of their territorial integrity, which is sovereignty, or their political independence, or any other manner which is inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. And then they have to help each other, give assistance to each other. And then they have to promote the maintenance of the international peace and security. And finally, they should not interfere in the domestic jurisdiction of other states. So these are the processes, the principles by which these outcomes can be achieved as stated in the purposes of international law, or the purposes for the United Nations organization members under Article 1 and Article 2. This we can call it as the international law policy or international law policies, which means a policy is a plan, policy is a direction, which comes from the purposes which we set in, which comes from the principles or the processes which we put for ourselves in order to achieve it. International law policies are largely derived from Article 1 of the UN Charter, which talks about 4 purposes, and Article 2 of the United Nations Charter, which talks about 7 principles or processes by which these purposes can be achieved. To put it simply, international law policy or international law policies are nothing but a combination of Article 1 and Article 2. A combination of the 4 purposes under Article 1 of the UN Charter and 7 principles under Article 2 of the United Nations Charter. All these put together becomes international law policy or international law policies. One might wonder how these policies, international law policies, where the purposes and the principles which are there under Article 1 and Article 2, they might impact or they will affect a country, say like India or Indian Constitution. How it will affect? We need to keep in mind that each and every country from a particular geographical space, because of the development of the human civilization with science, technology, culture, and so on, we all are moving everywhere from one place to another place. So each and every country, their national and citizen, they go to the other country. Similarly, each and every citizen of other countries or other nationals of different countries, they also enter our country or any other countries. So international law policy in relation to a municipal law, in relation to a domestic law, it has a two-way action. One is inside out and the other is outside in. Inside out means how Indian constitution or the Indian legal system will react to international law policies. Outside in means how international community will impact their relations with India. So these policies, international law policies, which come from Article 1 and Article 2, the 4 purposes and 7 principles, who will understand as international law policies for our country under the Indian Constitution or under the Indian legal system? In my understanding, there are 5 major actors who have to understand these international law policies, the 4 purposes and 7 principles under Article 1 and Article 2 of the United Nations Charter, respectively. If these 5 major actors understand these international law policies, it becomes very easy for these 5 major actors to strengthen the Indian Constitution as well as to accomplish all the goals of the Indian Constitution, the ideals of the Indian Constitution, as well as the international law and a contribution from Indian Constitution from the Indian state towards international law and towards international community. This is all that we need to keep in mind as well as to keep in action. So who are those 5 major actors? We all know the 3 organs of the state: legislative, executive, and judicial. And the 2 which I always add in my understanding is legal education and legal profession. Because only from legal education we create legal professionals who become either a legislator, who become either a public servant, executive, or who become a judicial officer or a judge or a justice in court. If they have this understanding in legal education, in legal research, in legal reasoning, if we give what we mean by international law policy or international law policies according to Article 4 and according to Article 1 and Article 2, the 4 purposes and 7 principles, if they understand, if in legal education it is being taught, if in legal research it is being reasoned out, the products which are coming out of the legal education, that is the legal professionals who form part of the 5 major actors of the legal system under the Indian Constitution, they can contribute to the India's contribution to the international law policies as well as international law policies which are coming from outside into the India. We will be able to interpret and filter it according to the Indian Constitution. Before we get into the 5 major actors, the executive, legislative, judiciary, legal education, and legal profession, what are those 3 things or 3 policies that can be kept in mind in action to adopt international law policies from a country's point of view? That is the most crucial thing. When we say international law policy or international law policies, though the understanding, the content, and the quality of those international law policies come from the commonly derived principles, commonly derived ideals, commonly derived state practices and customs and treaties in furtherance of those great ideals, which is peace and security, self-determination, equal rights, good faith, peaceful settlement of disputes, not to interfere in domestic jurisdiction of other countries, not to use force or threat to use force. All these actually emerge from different countries from their domestic jurisdiction, from their municipal legal system outside. If a country like India is remaining like this, with the overarching Indian constitutional law, principles and practices and operative mechanisms, the executive, the judiciary, the legislative, of course, the legal education and the legal profession, they have to think and they have to act in furtherance of how these international law policies aid the implementation of the Indian constitutional law values. That is exactly what is called the policy understanding. Each and every country had to serve themselves ultimately, because that is exactly what we see as the ideal of international law, as the purposes of international law, as the principles of international law. Sovereign equality of all states, principle of self-determination, equal rights, not to use force or threat to use force, to follow everything in good faith. Who are those actors who will follow all those? Each and every country in their respective spaces in relation to themselves with that of the international community. Each and every country, a country A or country B, in relation to rest of the countries in the international communities, in their relations, social, cultural, economic, political, and whatever be it. So international law policy means how the legislature in India, how the judiciary in India, how the executive in India, how the legal educators in India, how the legal professionals in India think about furthering the accomplishment of the Indian Constitution, Indian constitutional guarantees and values that are there under many sources. Before we get into what are those sources under the Indian constitutional law, whereby we need to bring these international policies into perspective, we need to know what are those three core policies that can be understood as international law policies which India need to adopt. What are those three core policies, international law policies that India need to keep in mind? This is exactly where the new dimensions come into picture. Because we are living in a new world and we are heading towards a future humanity. And we have a past baggage. How do we understand where we were and what we were, to what we are right now, and towards where we want to go? This understanding is the policy. As I said, policy is the plan. And plan is nothing but purposes and principles or procedures or processes. What do we do? How do we keep this in mind? The three core policies to be kept in mind by legislature, judiciary, executive, legal education, and legal professional under different aspects of the Indian Constitution, which I will come to it little later. But the three core policies, which I call it as international policies by a country, and in our context, in the Indian context, the three core policies, which I call as three new dimensions which Indian legal system as a whole, the five actors under the Indian Constitution as a whole, to keep in mind, to keep in action. They are one. We need to keep in mind that the international law principles which might come from outside, or the international law practices which might come from the international community or the international relations into our country, it must accommodate the Indian system. It must accommodate the Indian values. It must accommodate the Indian culture. Which means the five major actors under the Indian Constitution or the legal system, executive, legislative, judiciary, legal education, and legal professionals, they need to keep in mind that whenever there is something which is going to come from outside in or inside out, it must be in furtherance of the Indian constitution, it must be in furtherance of the Indian nation, it must be in furtherance of the Indian cultural and value systems. Because India is different from Trans-Pacific or Transatlantic. We are not Europe or we are not United States of America. India is a different country of its own. Like each and every country in Europe has its own. A country in Europe doesn't necessarily follow the practice of other countries unless and until it is beneficial to them. So also a state in America doesn't or necessarily follow the other state unless and until it is beneficial to them. Which means our excessive reliance because of the past history of the British colonization or any other impacts from the invasions from different countries, we need to keep in mind that they need to be removed. Which means our excessive reliance on, say, Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence or Eurocentric approach or principles that were forced under the foreign invasions as to what is a state, what is a constitution, what is a law, what is international law all about for a country, that needs to be recontextualized according to the Indian situation, according to the Indian cultural value systems. This doesn't mean that we are against any other country or any other international or international community. International law is nothing but equal self-determination for all, sovereign equality of all states, respect for self-determination, equality of self-existence for each and everyone. Even if you see a country in Europe, say like France or Belgium or Italy, they do not necessarily follow another country's practices in relation to international law or international law policy in their respective municipal jurisdiction, because each and every country is different. International law unity, international law which talks about universal peace, is just not about uniformity. It is not about uniformity. It is about unity in which the diversity is permitted and diversity is allowed. Because Indian constitution, which needs to be accomplished, means Indian citizens, their needs to be accomplished, their rights needs to be ascertained, their situation needs to be empowered. So this is exactly what is being studied in legal pluralism also, that each and every country can decide what they want, which law they want. So the reliance on a particular foreign interpretations, reliance on foreign jurisprudence or imported jurisprudence or Eurocentric or America-centric or transatlantic, trans-Pacific centric interpretations parachuting from there inside into our country will not help the Indians, will not help the Indian nationals and Indian citizens. Which means it will not serve the goals of the Indian Constitution or ideals of the Indian Constitution. So the first understanding that we need to keep in mind about the international policy that India should keep in mind is this: avoiding the reliance on the Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence or Eurocentric methods or any kind of principles and practices which came as a result of foreign invasions, which defines what a state is, what a constitution is, what law is, or what international law is. They all belong to different geographical spaces and their cultures and their traditions and so on. If they, each and every country ought to respect international law, means they ought to respect each and every country's uniqueness. This policy, this understanding needs to be kept in mind by legislators, by executives, by judiciary, by legal educational professionals as well as legal professionals. This is the first thing that we need to keep in mind as a new dimension among the three core policies. The second policy, sometimes we bring certain interpretations which are non-contextual from certain courts, foreign courts. The reason why we need to keep this as a policy directive, as a policy insight, is because India as a country is very diverse, very complex. Its pluralism is so complex and so huge. which is different from the Americas or the Europe or any other country, where things are largely mono-religious in culture or mono-religious in linguistic identity or any other form of identity. Though some mixes may be there, but by and large it is one and the same. Or the varieties may not be more than 2 or 3. Whereas a country like India, each and every state is different, and India is a union of states. Importing a particular interpretation from a foreign court in order to decide a particular dispute has no connection with what we want to achieve under the Indian Constitution. We need to keep this in mind. Non-contextual interpretations from foreign policies or foreign courts, unless and until it helps the Indian citizen, unless and until it helps the Indian petitioner in the court, maybe in a judicial interpretation or even a legal policy framework which we are making, or an executive action. And this needs to be taught, and this needs to be practiced. This needs to be argued in the court of law. Is the second important policy understanding we need to keep in mind, which I call as the second new dimension. The third new dimension is the reductionist approach to the human societies and human life. If you see each and every country, they have an understanding of what their life is all about. Some countries have a mixture of social, cultural, and economic. Some countries are predominantly religious. Some countries are predominantly spiritual. Some countries have a psychological import. Some countries take care of ecology a lot. There are so many ways to look at it, so many ways to understand this. So when we reduce everything only to the social or only to the economic or only to the political or only to the religious, we are reducing the human life itself, the human societies itself, and we are reducing the interpretation of the Constitution itself. If you see the preamble of the Indian Constitution, it says, "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign republic, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to assure, secure its citizens justice, which is social, economic, political," and so on, it expands. It's just not only social, economic, political. And then comes equality of status and opportunity, liberty of faith, freedom of speech, expression, and so on. And then dignity, assuring the dignity, the fraternity, the unity, and the integrity, and so on. It also makes sense to have this kind of an understanding when we want to know what is an international law policy for India. Take the case of Article 14 or Article 21 for that matter, any other provision of the Indian Constitution. What it was in 1950 and what it is right now in 2021. The article remains the same, but the interpretations of that particular provision or that particular article has changed immense, which means the human growth is taking place. What was only barely social, what was only barely economic, what is barely political, is now moving towards human dignity, the well-being, higher well-being quotient, and so on. So to reduce an interpretation, a legal interpretation, as well as a policy thinking as only social, as only economic, as only political, is to reduce the human life itself, which is not the case, which is not the truth of nature. So these three core policies are to be kept in mind. That the excessive reliance on or over reliance on Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence or Eurocentric understanding of what law is or principles and practices of the foreign invasions as to what is state, what is constitution, what is law, what is human right, what is international law for a country, needs to be contextualized according to the Indian Constitution, according to the Indian culture and value system. 1. 2. Non-contextual interpretations from foreign policies and courts should not be imported just like that. It needs to be again contextualized, considering the Indian diversity, considering the unity and diversity of India, the heterogeneity, the pluralism which is there. And finally, the reductionist approach to human life as only social or only economic or only political or a combination of social and economic political needs to be expanded. especially for a country like India where heterogeneity, pluralism, and diversity is maximum. So if we understand these three policies in mind, core policies in mind, and make the five major actors in law under the Indian Constitution, the legislative, executive, judiciary, the legal education and legal profession, then we will be able to positively impact the realization of preamble of the Indian Constitution. We will be able to realize the guarantees that are there under Fundamental Rights Part 3. We will be able to give new interpretations, new dimensions to Article 32, Article 226, the writ remedies, Article 136, special leave petition, Article 142, which is right to complete justice, or even Article 368, which is the amendment procedure, what I call is the law on social transformation, the bottom-up model and the top-down model. And this, when it is brought into the legal education, legal academics and research, if we do this by bringing this understanding in our thought, in our action, especially by the five major actors, legislative, executive, judiciary, a scholar, an educationist, a teacher, a researcher in law, and also a legal professional, whatever be the nature of the legal profession. India as a country in international community and international community towards India, that merging will be very clear. And these three core policies, they add to new dimensions. They add to the three new dimensions. This is what we need to keep in mind. So to quickly recap, that international law is all about a body of rules, body of laws or body of regulations derived out of customs and treaties and several other sources, which we can study from the Article 38 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice under the United Nations Charter. And international law policy or international law policies are nothing but the purposes that are there at Article 1 of the United Nations Charter and Article 2, which are principles of the United Nations Charter or the international community by which we will perform all the functions, by which we fulfill all the purposes of the international community as a whole. And these purposes, 4 purposes and 7 principles, are the 7 processes put together under Article 1 under Article 2 of the United Nations Charter, put together becomes the international law policy or international law policies. And the international law policies to be applied in the domestic jurisdiction, to be invoked in the municipal jurisdiction through a constitution of a particular country, through Indian constitution. We need to keep these points in mind, the 7 phenomenon, the 7 principles and the 4 purposes, and we emerge with the 3 basic dimensions or the core new dimensions. The excessive reliance on the Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence or the Eurocentric method or any other practices that have come from a foreign country in relation to law, constitution, the meaning of it, the interpretation of it, and so on. And recontextualizing the interpretations that are coming from outside or the interpretations that are going from inside out. It needs to ensure that we are fulfilling the objectives of the Indian Constitution. And finally, to enlarge the human perspective, the social perspective, the economic perspective, the political perspective, and then move upward. All these create wonderful policy mechanism for us. So these are the 3 core dimensions which we need to keep in mind. And by doing and understanding and incorporating, studying and researching these things, it becomes very easy for us to achieve not only the goals of the Indian Constitution, but also the goals of international law. With these thoughts, I stop here and I would like to share some more points through the documents which I will be sharing it with the respective coordinator here, and we will meet again. Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.